Harley didn't make a big announcement. They just cut deep, without warning, without explanation. No apology, just silence. But that silence spoke volumes. Riders felt it, workers lived it. And if this brand ever meant something to you, you need to see what happened next. Watch till the end. The cut that cracked the chrome. This cut wasn't just bold, it was dangerous. It started as a whisper. No dramatic press conference, no open letter to riders. Just a quiet, almost sterile notice sent to Harley-Davidson dealers. The company was cutting production of several legendary models, bikes like the Sportster and Ultra Limited. For riders who grew up dreaming about these machines, this wasn't a pivot, it was a gut punch. The Sportster had been the gateway bike for decades. The Ultra Limited was a symbol of long-haul loyalty. Eliminating them didn't just shrink the product line, it shrank the soul of the brand. There was no clear replacement, no exciting new model waiting in the wings, just vague promises about future-facing strategy and portfolio realignment. The internet exploded. Forums boiled with betrayal. YouTubers eulogized the bikes like fallen comrades. Harley just fired its own fan base, one writer wrote, and that didn't feel like hyperbole. It felt like truth. No matter how corporate spin dressed it up, riders knew what it meant. Fewer bikes, fewer choices, and fewer reasons to stick around. But what started online quickly turned physical. At the one place Harley once owned the spotlight. The empty roar was loudest at America's biggest rally. If this is hitting a nerve, hit that like button. And tell us in the comments, when did Harley stop feeling like Harley to you? Your story might be the one someone else needs to hear. Empty tents and quiet rage. Harley showed up to Sturgis, but no one else did. Every August, Sturgis becomes sacred ground. Thousands of bikers converge in South Dakota for the same reason: freedom on two wheels, shared over beer, chrome, and rumbling engines. Harley-Davidson had always been the centerpiece, until now. At Sturgis 2024, Harley's tent was practically a ghost town. Once the hub of demo rides, giveaways, and endless traffic, it now sat idle. Photos spread online of unsold bikes lined up in eerie silence. Staff stood around, scrolling phones, trying not to look bored. The most cutting part? No one was yelling, no protests, just a chilling quiet that said everything. This wasn't anger, it was rejection. Riders walked past Harley's booth like it didn't exist. Some called it the Bud Light tent of bikes. Others said it was too little, too late. The brand that once defined rebellion now felt like an exhibit, outdated and out of touch. And that bitterness wasn't just among customers, it was boiling inside the plants where the bikes used to be made. While Sturgis grew silent, another silence took hold, one much colder. Don't ride out with junk gear. We link the stuff we actually trust: helmets, gloves, tools. Check the description and ride ready. Jobs out, trust gone. This wasn't cost-cutting, it was betrayal. Menomonee Falls, Wisconsin, the heart of Harley's American manufacturing operation, or it used to be. When workers learned that production was shifting to Thailand, despite past promises, they didn't buy the corporate excuse of a temporary global balance. This wasn't the first betrayal, but it felt like the final one. Many of these workers had held on through lean years. They had taken hits on contracts, hours, and pay to keep the company afloat. In return, they were shown the door. One union rep said, "We stood by Harley through thick and thin." They left the minute it got inconvenient. Worse still, Harley wasn't even honest about it. There was no town hall, no apology, just HR memos and vanishing shifts. The bikes that once rolled out of Wisconsin with pride would now be built halfway around the world, then shipped back with "Assembled in America" stickers. For those who gave their lives to the line, the silence from leadership felt like a knife twist. But behind that silence was a voice they were just beginning to understand. The man behind it all wasn't new to disruption, but he was new to riding. The CEO who didn't speak biker. Jochen Zeitz didn't just change the brand, he rewired its soul. Jochen Zeitz wasn't a Harley guy. He was a climate executive with a European pedigree, famous for transforming Puma into a sustainability-first brand. That background didn't scare riders. What scared them was his complete lack of interest in speaking their language. His vision for Harley sounded like it came out of a tech startup accelerator. Sustainable mobility, future-focused alignment, and ESG integration. It didn't matter if it was smart on paper. On the street, it landed like a bad punchline. The shift wasn't subtle. Loud pipes became quiet prototypes. Electric models were rushed to market. Heritage models were slashed. Then came the interview, the one where Zeitz proudly called himself the Taliban of climate change. To Harley's working-class core, veterans, patriots, small-town mechanics, it wasn't edgy, it was offensive. Under Zeitz, Harley didn't just modernize, it lost its roar. The gritty, oil-under-the-nails brand that once stood for rebellion now read like a LinkedIn resume. Riders weren't against change, they were against erasure. And as they realized this wasn't a phase, it was a rebrand, they began preparing a response that would echo louder than any press release. And that response wasn't just emotional, it was organized. From Brotherhood to bouncer signs. When club patches were banned, something sacred snapped. It began quietly. A dealership in California posted a request for riders to remove their jackets before entering. In Texas, a sign appeared. No club colors allowed. Soon, it was happening across the country. Harley-Davidson dealers were turning away riders wearing patches. The same club symbols that had defined biker culture for generations were suddenly being treated like threats. For those who wore them, the message was unmistakable. You're no longer welcome. These weren't outlaw gangs. They were veterans, long-haul riders, men and women who had logged tens of thousands of miles. The patches weren't fashion statements. They were legacy, brotherhood, and commitment. Being told to cover them up or leave wasn't about rules. It was about identity. For many, it was humiliating, and for others, it was the final insult. Harley never officially addressed the shift. The silence hit harder than any policy. Riders flooded forums with personal stories. One Vietnam vet wrote, "I've spent more time on Harleys than in my own house, and now they're telling me I'm not their kind of customer." For a brand once synonymous with a rebellion, this was corporate sanitation at its most cutting. Brotherhood had been replaced by branding guidelines, and the riders knew it. And while that brotherhood was being shut out, another group was being ushered in with open arms. Rebranded and rejected. Harley's ads look cool, but the riders feel cold. Suddenly, Harley-Davidson's identity shifted. Gone were the hard-edged ads filled with open roads and gritty riders. In their place came influencer-laden photo shoots, clean cityscapes, and electric bike promos. It wasn't just a pivot in tone, it was a total rewrite of the brand's DNA. The new target audience? Tech-savvy urbanites and digital creators. The result? A brand that looked unrecognizable to its base. Billboards showed pastel helmets. Riders sipped coffee next to bikes cleaner than most riders' boots. Mobility replaced freedom. Lifestyle replaced legacy. Harley used to scream attitude. Now it whispered algorithm. And that shift hit riders in the gut. The company wasn't just changing its image, it was erasing theirs. They'd built a culture around oil-stained jeans and roadside repairs. Now their brand wanted oat milk and city parking. Online backlash was instant. Riders mocked the new campaigns. Harley used to be about rebellion, now it's about reach metrics, one post read. Another added, they're not selling bikes, they're selling Wi-Fi on wheels. The distance between the company and its core audience was no longer symbolic, it was visible. But while Harley tried to rebrand its way into relevance, one competitor chose to dig in. The Indian takeover begins. Harley dropped the flag, Indian picked it up. While Harley shed its identity, Indian Motorcycle found its footing. Instead of courting influencers, they courted veterans. Instead of reinventing Americana, they embraced it. Indian didn't just build bikes, they built community. And riders took notice. Indian's approach felt authentic. Social media campaigns featured dusty road trips, weathered vests, and real riders. At rallies, Indian flags flew proudly next to the American ones. They didn't sidestep biker culture, they saluted it. Performance backed it up. The Scout lineup came with raw power and traditional appeal. Riders praised the bike's stance, torque, and attitude. Even die-hard Harley loyalists were switching and posting about it. "Never thought I'd trade in my Dyna," one rider wrote, "but this Scout rips." Indian didn't pander. They honored what Harley once stood for. And while Harley issued press releases about sustainability, Indian handed out demo rides to anyone who walked by. Their market share grew. Riders under 40 weren't just curious, they were converting. And for older bikers tired of being ignored, Indian felt like home again. The loyalty shift wasn't quiet anymore. It was roaring. But beneath all the optics and emotion, another shift was underway, one that hit riders right in the wallet. The vanishing value of a legend. When even used Harleys start piling up, you know something's broken. Something unusual began showing up online. Thousands of used Harleys for sale. Not just old beaters, but recent models. Bikes with under 5,000 miles. Riders weren't just getting bored, they were trying to get out. Prices plummeted. Resale values collapsed. What used to be a dependable investment now felt like a trap. Sellers in cities like Phoenix and Nashville listed Softails and Road Kings at half their original price and still struggled to get offers. One rider said, "I knocked off $4,000 and got 2 messages. That never used to happen." Dealers hesitated on trade-ins. Financing tightened. Inventory backed up. For many, the Harley name no longer carried value, and that shift echoed throughout the culture. Riders who used to boast about their investment now kept quiet. Repair shops and custom builders felt the sting. Fewer upgrades, fewer commissions. The brand that once held its value better than any cruiser now looked like a sinking stock. And Harley, silent. No acknowledgement, no answer. Just another PR vacuum where confidence used to be. That silence signaled more than denial. It signaled retreat. And in that vacuum, a new wave of questions began rising. Not just about bikes, about loyalty, about what it really means to ride American. The boycott that didn't blink. This wasn't noise. It was an uprising. What began as forum grumbling and a few angry videos evolved into a movement. Riders who once bled orange and black began organizing digitally, pushing a grassroots boycott that struck like lightning. They weren't just complaining. They were mobilizing. On Reddit, Facebook, Telegram, and TikTok, the message spread. Don't buy new. Don't service with Harley. Don't step foot in a dealership. Share your story. Remove your stickers. Trade your bike. This wasn't noise, it was targeted retaliation. YouTubers who used to build Harleys began making teardown videos of why they switched to Indian or Triumph. Others filmed their last rides or publicly removed Harley decals before posting it all online. Within days, the hashtag #RideFreeNotHarley trended. A viral Instagram reel showed veterans returning jackets to a dealership that had banned club colors. It racked up millions of views. But this wasn't performance. It was protest from believers who felt betrayed. Dealers noticed. Foot traffic dropped. Test rides were canceled. Accessories went untouched. Flash discounts came and went. The rebellion wasn't against the product, it was against the principle. And Harley had no answer. But the digital revolt was just the beginning. A much louder institution was about to weigh in. Capitol Hill rolls in. Harley took the subsidies. Then they took the jobs overseas. Congress had let Harley skate for decades. The brand was seen as too iconic to question. But when hundreds of jobs vanished from U.S. plants while operations ramped up in Thailand, and when federal tax dollars had funded those very American factories, lawmakers reacted. It started with a bipartisan letter from Midwest senators demanding a breakdown of Harley's federal aid usage. The company had taken over $100 million in subsidies, credits, and relief. Now they were sending the work overseas. Next came pressure from unions and veterans groups. Public letters, petitions, media blitzes. These weren't fringe voices. They had backed Harley for years. Now they were turning on it, demanding hearings and accountability. The dam broke when internal memos leaked. One showed Harley execs discussing political insulation for future layoffs. At a congressional hearing, a senator from Pennsylvania held up the memo and declared, "This isn't strategy. This is betrayal." Clips of that hearing spread fast. A congresswoman from Iowa confronted Harley's legal representative with, "You took the image of America. You profited from it. Now it's time to explain." By month's end, Harley faced investigations, possible legislation, and a surge of public distrust. But pressure wasn't just coming from Capitol Hill, it was now threatening the boardroom. The Boardroom Rebellion. It wasn't just riders who revolted, investors did too. Inside Harley's boardroom, the storm hit hard. Public backlash was one thing, but when major investors turned on leadership, panic set in. Activist shareholders were organizing a rebellion of their own. At the forefront was H Partners, a firm with a track record of shaking up legacy brands. They accused CEO Jochen Seitz of misreading the market, abandoning loyal consumers, and chasing foreign ESG points instead of U.S. profits. They weren't subtle. They launched a proxy campaign to unseat several board members. Their goals? Restore American manufacturing, reconnect with core riders, cut distractions, focus on domestic growth. Their message resonated. Many investors had held Harley stock for decades. Now they watched sales drop and reputation evaporate. Investor calls turned tense. Executives leaned on buzzwords like urban transformation and digital rebrand. One analyst snapped, "You're selling rebellion with corporate compliance." That's a contradiction. News outlets picked up the battle. CNBC covered Harley's identity crisis. The Wall Street Journal revealed that large firms were preparing to divest. Harley's stock slid, not in a crash, but a slow, relentless bleed. But while Wall Street argued over margins, small-town America was already feeling the consequences. The town that lost its roar. When the bike stopped, the town stopped too. York, Pennsylvania had been a Harley town for nearly a century. Factories, diners, and barbershops thrived off the heartbeat of the plant. The sound of production wasn't just noise, it was the sound of life. Then it stopped. Harley cut shifts. Contractors disappeared. Suppliers folded. A diner that had opened for first-shift crews since the 1970s closed overnight. Its farewell sign read, "We can't survive the silence." A local warehouse that once served Harley's build chain went bankrupt. Its final unpaid invoice sat with a Harley vendor. The emotional damage went deeper. Parents who once boasted about their kids getting jobs at the plant now encouraged them to leave town. One former supervisor, speaking at a church meeting, said, "We didn't lose just jobs. We lost a legacy." Murals faded. Billboards disappeared. The factory didn't shut down all at once. It just stopped pulsing. And no one came to protest. The loss was too total, too personal. The sound of roaring bikes once defined this town. Now it was just memory. And as York struggled to find its soul again, the rest of the market was already shifting. Competitors were seizing the moment, and Harley was almost out of moves. Wall Street's final warning. The numbers are in, and they're ugly. By late summer, even Harley-Davidson's most loyal investors stopped defending the company's trajectory. The stock's slow slide turned into a visible decline. Analysts across multiple firms issued downgrades, citing weak U.S. sales, growing inventories, and collapsing brand equity. A brand once called a heritage asset now looked like a fading luxury relic, relevant only to those who still believed in a myth. The concern wasn't just the quarterly loss, it was the pattern. Engagement metrics dropped. Test ride bookings plunged. Apparel sales withered. Most alarming, resale values tanked. Within a year, the average Harley lost nearly double what it once had. That killed consumer confidence and rattled the lending market. Executives responded with vague statements about leaner operations and transitional alignment. But analysts weren't buying it. One hedge fund manager put it simply, "They're losing relevance and pretending it's a strategy." That quote aired on CNBC and went viral. Suddenly, Harley's troubles weren't just in financial reports, they were headline news. Pension funds began to retreat, index funds rebalanced. Even legacy shareholders began releasing statements questioning leadership. The brand, once too iconic to fail, now looked like a Harvard Business School cautionary tale. And Harley's weakness wasn't just attracting critics, it was attracting competition. Other brands smell blood. While Harley flailed, rivals went for the kill. The vacuum left by Harley's collapse didn't stay empty for long. Indian Motorcycle seized the moment, rolling out bold campaigns that directly addressed Harley defectors. Still want the ride without the baggage? Yamaha launched aggressive trade-in deals offering generous buyouts on used Harleys for riders ready to jump ship. Triumph rolled out ads featuring U.S. workers on British bikes with slogans about real heritage, no excuses. Royal Enfield opened 3 new showrooms in towns where Harley had just closed up shop. But they didn't just sell bikes, they built culture. Local music, free coffee, ride-out Saturdays, live wrench nights. The invitation was clear. If Harley turned its back on you, we never will. Boutique brands moved fast. Janus, Revival, Rivid, once niche curiosities, now stood as real contenders. They didn't just sell motorcycles, they sold belonging. Riders streamed their builds, hosted live Q&As, and offered more custom options than Harley had dared in years. These brands made you feel seen. YouTube responded in kind. Reviewers who once spent hours comparing Harley exhaust notes were now diving deep into Indian's torque curves or Enfield's neo-retro styling. One side-by-side video pitting the Indian Scout against the Harley Nightster exploded past 2 million views, and Harley didn't come out on top. In dealerships across the country, the conversation had changed. It was no longer about selling chrome dreams, it was about specs, value, and connection. Riders asked about Vulcans, Shadows, and Rebels by name. And just like that, Harley lost something even more important than customers. It lost default status. But under that market chaos, something deeper was unraveling. Freedom, globalization, and the new front line. This isn't just about motorcycles. It's about identity. Harley's failure didn't just echo across motorcycle culture, it echoed through the American psyche. At kitchen tables and union halls, people weren't asking, "Why did Harley change?" They were asking, "What happened to us?" Harley was supposed to represent freedom, working-class pride, and rebellion. But to many, it became a symbol of corporate detachment. Riders lost jobs while executives delivered ESG presentations abroad. Bikes once built by veterans now arrived in crates from Asia. The American flag was still printed on the merch, but not on the parts. This wasn't isolated. It reflected bigger fractures. Globalization versus nationalism. Wall Street versus workers. Brand equity versus community loyalty. Harley's story was no longer just about motorcycles, it was about whether American legacy could survive corporate transformation. Policy papers started referencing Harley in discussions on economic betrayal. Labor unions cited it in campaigns demanding stronger domestic sourcing. The phrase Harley moment began circulating among economists, a shorthand for when brand loyalty collapses under the weight of misaligned values. Harley's decline had become metaphor. Its fall marked a shift, not just in consumer choice, but in national self-perception. And as institutions stumbled, something organic began to grow in the gaps they left behind. If you've made it this far, you know this isn't just about bikes, it's about betrayal, identity, and power. Subscribe now. We're tracking every brand that dares to forget who built them. The riders who took the road back. Harley lost the road, but riders found their own way. Far from Wall Street, a revival was forming, quiet, improvised, and powerful. In garages, backyards, and rural shops, riders began building again. They weren't buying. They were welding, wrenching, and sharing parts. The bikes they rode weren't showroom models, they were stories. Old Harleys were stripped, repaired, chopped, and customized. Young riders learned from older mechanics. Clubs shifted from dealership discounts to DIY culture. People posted builds online with pride. Built in Ohio. Parts from 3 counties. Zero corporate involvement. The irony was stunning. Harley's own alienation had triggered a rebirth of American biker culture. New apparel brands emerged, not licensed but homemade. Patches mocked Harley's downfall. Rideouts were held without sponsors, banners, or hashtags. What Harley had tried to corporatize was now more alive than ever, precisely because it had been abandoned. A few startups even began exploring new US-made motorcycles. Nothing flashy, just honest machines built for real riders. They weren't chasing investors, they were chasing purpose. And in that, the future of American biking wasn't lost. It was rediscovered, on back roads, in welding fumes, in handshake deals at swap meets. The brand may have collapsed, but the culture? It just kicked into gear. What happened to Harley-Davidson wasn't a glitch, it was a warning, a symbol of what's happening to legacy brands across the country, cutting corners, chasing Wall Street, and forgetting the very people who built them. Riders, workers, veterans, small towns, maybe even you. If this story hit you in the gut, it's because you already sensed it. The shift, the silence, the creeping feeling that something we grew up with, something loud, proud, and American, is being quietly dismantled and repackaged for someone else. But that doesn't mean we just let it happen. So here's what to do. Like this video if you want these stories to break through the noise. Drop a comment. Share your moment. When did Harley lose you? When did the brand stop sounding like yours? And most importantly, subscribe. Because this is bigger than motorcycles. We're tracking every collapse, every rebellion, every moment the system tries to rewrite what matters. The next company, the next betrayal, the next fight for identity, it's already happening. And we'll be right here when it does. Subscribe now, stay sharp, and never hand over your story without a fight.